It was a particularly windy night, the kind that made our old house creak and groan as if it were alive. My parents had left earlier in the day to visit my grandmother, who was ill, leaving me home alone. I wasn't new to staying by myself, but there was something unsettling about the solitude this evening. Every gust of wind seemed to whisper secrets through the chipped paint of the window frames, and each shadow flickered as though hiding something sinister. To distract myself, I nestled into an old plush armchair with a book about a haunted Victorian mansion. The eerie tales usually fascinated me, but tonight they only served to heighten my unease. I wrapped a blanket tighter around my shoulders, trying to shake off the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The hours ticked by, the grandfather clock in the hall marking each one with a resonant chime that echoed too loudly in the empty house. As midnight approached, the wind's howling intensified, and I decided it was time to abandon my book and head to bed. Turning off the lights downstairs, I made my way to the staircase. The old wooden steps creaked underfoot, sounding like cautious steps of someone trying not to be heard. Halfway up the stairs, a noise stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a dragging sound, like heavy furniture being moved across the hardwood floors of the second story. My heart thumped wildly against my ribs. "It's just the house settling," I whispered to myself, though the logical part of my mind rejected this explanation. The noise was deliberate, intentional, and unlike any household settling I'd ever heard. Gripping the banister, I forced myself to continue up the stairs. The noise grew louder with each step, and as I reached the landing, it abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was deep and heavy, pressing against my ears with the weight of unspoken threats. I hesitated outside my bedroom, where the door stood slightly ajar. That was unusual. I always kept it closed. Swallowing my fear, I pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the silver glow of moonlight filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long, dancing shadows across the floor. Everything appeared normal at first glance. My books were still neatly stacked on the desk, and my clothes hung quietly in the open closet. But the air was different. It was colder, with a faint metallic scent that I couldn't place. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A quick shadow flitting across the wall. Not the shadow of a tree limb swayed by the wind, but something distinctly human. "Who's there?" My voice was barely audible, a mix of fear and defiance. No response came, only the sound of my own ragged breathing. Mustering all my courage, I stepped into the room, my eyes darting from one corner to another, searching for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a whisper caressed my ear, chilling me to the bone. "Don't turn around." The voice was soft and menacing, and every instinct screamed at me to flee. But I was frozen, caught in the grip of an overwhelming terror. The room temperature dropped sharply. My breath formed a cloud in the air, and I felt an unmistakable presence just behind me. There was a rustle, like fabric brushing against fabric, and then silence. After what felt like an eternity, I gathered enough courage to whirl around, but there was nothing there, just the empty room and the moonlight. Shaken, I dashed out of the room and bolted down the stairs, not stopping until I reached the safety of the lit living room. Grabbing my phone, I called my parents, my fingers trembling so much I barely managed to dial the number. I didn't tell them what had happened, only that I was scared and needed them to come home. They agreed without hesitation, their voices filled with concern. While waiting for them, I sat curled up on the couch, the TV on for company, casting flickering lights and muffled sounds into the tense air. Every little noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. It was torturous, the wait, filled with dread and the echo of that whisper in my ear. When my parents finally arrived, they found me huddled by the door, wide-eyed and pale. I tried to explain, but my words tumbled out incoherent and frantic. They listened, brows furrowed in worry, and then did a thorough check of the house. We found nothing amiss, no signs of forced entry, No mysterious footprints, just the quiet solitude of our home. Despite the normalcy, sleep was elusive that night for me. I lay in bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, listening to the house breathe and settle. Every small sound seemed magnified in the darkness, and the memory of that whisper kept replaying in my mind. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that it had been a product of my imagination, an echo of the ghost stories I had been reading, mixed with the anxiety of being alone. But the feeling of being watched never quite left me, and sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I would still hear that soft, eerie whisper.